Hello everyone, and welcome to the exclusive London Games Fest official selection video for RAM Random Access Mayhem. I'm Andrew Cunningham, the game's creative director and gameplay programmer, and joining me on commentary is...
Hi, I'm Toby Murray, and I'm the co-director and lead producer on RAM, and we're going to be walking you through a full run of our current public demo today. Random Access Mayhem is the roguelike shooter with no player character, but what does that actually mean, Andrew?
There is no physical single protagonist of the game. You instead swap control between the different enemies. Currently we have 4, and the final game is slated to have 8 unique controllable robot types.
And the thing controlling them is actually this rogue AI agent called the Golem. And its entire state of being is to gain fitness score, which in the top left corner of the screen increments, and you get these trick shots and these points. And then you'll notice in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, there's these 2 bars. There's a top bar and a bottom bar, and those are what we call juice. You have local juice and global juice, and this swap juice is this currency that's essentially acting like a health bar. Because in a game where you can just kill the guy that you were and swap, it's really hard to die. So to mitigate that, we have this whole mechanic that is built around trying to incentivize swapping while also being stylish and careful. I think Andrew can probably talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, you'll see in the gameplay that I'm the one playing here. I'm going for some pretty unorthodox methods of killing enemies with barrels, swapping before killing enemies, that kind of thing. And that's all because RAM is a very style-centric game. So killing enemies in flashier ways, there's many different trick shots you can perform, contributes to giving increased score, which inflates the fitness total in your top left there, which has a greater role, which we can explain a bit later.
Right, and so the way it's structured is that you have these floors, and the floors are made by hand, but in each floor there are multiple encounters. So this room is going to clear, you get an upgrade for clearing each room, and then we'll go to the next floor, and it'll be randomly picked from a bunch of different ones that we've made. And then the patterns that the enemies spawn in are also randomized, so there's a really big amount of depth here, so that every run really does feel unique. And additionally, the upgrades themselves are also randomized, and you'll notice that the upgrades are only for one bot, and a lot of people get confused about this, like why don't we have general upgrades? And the big fun part of RAM is that you're actually kind of having 8 builds at once. You're not even having, like in Hades, you pick one weapon and you make a build for that weapon, but in RAM you can really tune each enemy in one run, so there's a lot more build variety. And I know Andrew's really good at kind of getting the most out of these enemies.
And even though the order of the levels are randomized, as Toby said, they're all individually handmade, so there's actually a fixed structure here, so there is an element of game knowledge and memorization to play with. If you can memorize the location of explosive barrels and certain enemy spawns over time, you can set up some pretty nifty gameplay.
We've been really lucky to have a community of people that are really interested in challenge running and speed running, and it's been really amazing to see how they've been able to push the game to its limits and also do it in really cool ways. Like right there you saw there was a joust, so that's one of these special trick shots, and all of the different enemies have their own unique trick shots, and you have some general trick shots. So by doing certain things you get extra points and multipliers for those, which gives you more fitness score. And fitness score is not just an arbitrary style system, it's actually used to buy things, like the upgrades cost a certain level of fitness, and then there will be shops. There's 2 shops in the first level for the demo, but there'll be more different ways of spending fitness in the full game, and it basically rewards you for playing in a more interesting way to kind of push you to really engage with the mechanics.
Yeah, RAM is pretty atypical for a style-based game, because when you think of a style game, you'll think of the sort of staples, or Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, Ultra Kill more recently. And in all those games, the common factor is that style tends to be something for advanced players to pursue of their own volition for bragging rights, or just to challenge themselves, which is all well and good. But in RAM, we wanted to do something a little bit more deliberate, which was to make the game explicitly easier to beat in a stylish way than in a boring way. Which is a kind of a new concept as far as I'm aware, for the genre at least. And to do that, we've coupled style directly into the sort of in-run item economy that directly regulates how powerful your robots get. And the idea is that if you play in a very boring way, then your run is going to get weaker and weaker over time until the enemies outscale you in power over the course of a longer run.
Something that I really like about it, though, is that it's not prohibitive. Like, you don't have to be really good at the game to do well. It's not like if you're gonna, just play in a bad way, you're gonna not make very many points. It's actually really easy to do these things because it incentivizes the best way to play. Like, there's no dodge mechanic. A lot of people are like, oh, why can't I dodge or like have a dodge roll or something? And really, that's the swap. Like, the swap is your mobility. So by making sure you're using the different hosts properly, you end up playing really well. And each enemy has unique ways of kind of interacting with each other, so you want to have those changes. Like you just saw there, the aphid flame boosted, that's the green guy, whereas the router has a dash. And by weaving them in and out, it's really hard to not kind of play more stylishly, and it's not a hard requirement. It's just kind of a natural outcome of just playing. And it's really fun. Like, I'm terrible at Ram, but I still have fun with it.
A general goal is to align the game so that like an effective way to play is also the interesting way to play. And of course, in a game that's centered around this gimmick of being able to swap between enemies and have no fixed player character, we want the player to be swapping as much as possible. And so a lot of the trick shots are built specifically to incentivize swapping. If you are about to die and swap out right before the enemy you're controlling dies, you get points for your own death, and that's called a close call trick shot. If you throw or shoot something at an enemy and then swap before that actually impacts and gets the kill, that is a trick shot, which gives you more points. So a lot of these systems are all built toward the goal of incentivizing swapping, because that keeps the gameplay fresh, and that...
like right there, you had a close call.
Yeah, that was me trying to look for the best way. I had a really damaged host, and so I was looking for a way to efficiently get out of it and also get points at the same time. A damaged host is not so much a liability as it is an opportunity in some cases.
Something cool here, some of the levels have little hidden upgrades, so you can actually make sure that the knowledge of the game kind of comes through. And speaking more about the upgrades, actually, we've kind of just been we haven't really talked specifically about what's being chosen, but there is quite a bit of variety in what you can have the characters do. We have 3 different tiers of upgrades, much like, like a common, rare, legendary type of item, but we call them common, radical, and breakthrough. And the common ones generally are stuff that you would expect, like movement speed or, more damage or, more bullets. But the radical and the breakthrough start to get pretty cool and really weird. So, instead of this router that we're playing as, instead of throwing a brick that has collision damage and explodes, now it's a dart and it does twice the collision damage but no longer explodes. And so you can define these builds for your characters that get really, really cool.
Yeah, because we have the upgrades tailored to each specific type of bot separately, we don't have to worry about compatibility or like making the upgrades generic. Like, we can have full subclass kind of upgrades that only apply to one bot.
So you can see there's 2 of those are actually breakthrough. There's induction and frayed wires. And frayed wires is a really strong one. But now we're actually at the shop. So we're halfway through the level, and the shop has a character. They'll chat to you. They have lots of different things to say. There's a little bit of lore in there. And at the shop, you can buy specific upgrades. You can get random upgrades, or you can refill some of your swap juice based on how stylish you were.
Yeah, the shop is where the style-based system really comes into its own, because as you're going through a run, you're accruing more and more and more of this excess style points. And getting to the shop is when you sort of put it to the test. Have I been playing stylishly or not? And if you've been playing well, then you're rewarded with a huge influx of new upgrades that'll power you through the second half of the run. Whereas if you weren't playing stylishly, I would have half of that or even less. So it makes quite a big difference. And it's going to make
a nice trick shot.
Yes, and it's going to make an even bigger difference once we get more levels into the game. Currently, this is a demo with only 1 stage, but the deeper you get into a run, the more you're going to feel that loss of potential power due to non-stylish play.
And now we're at the second half level. There's a new song playing, and we have an amazing musician working on the project, Nahu Pyro. And you'll notice that the music's actually dynamic. So when you stop, when you finish an encounter, you kill all the enemies, the lead tracks fade in or fade out, and then you start to just have like the backtracks, and it's more of like an exploration sound. But something that a lot of people don't notice is that there actually are individual bot tracks that play. So when you swap, there's a subtle change. There's a different synth that plays, and it really makes it feel like when you're changing, there's more meaning to it, because it happens not only from a gameplay perspective, but also from an audio perspective.
Mm-hmm. And as you can see in that last room, if you get into a rhythm, encounters can go by pretty quickly. Like, this game has a bit of that nuclear throne DNA where both you and the enemies are all very, very fragile. There's nothing really tanky in this game besides a few very specific elite enemies, so the aesthetic of Ram is more so you should kill everything before it has a chance to kill you, rather than carefully dodging bullets and things like that. So it's a very frantic, hyper-violent experience. you can take a lot of risks, and especially because you can swap out of dead hosts, you can make mistakes and recover from them quickly as long as those mistakes don't pile up, and to the extent that your swap juice down there gets depleted too much.
And you spoke about some elites, and there's some right here. And so we have some enemies that are different colors, and they have special upgrades. So these green routers actually have bulk delivery, which means they throw extra grenades. And what's cool is that if you had swapped into them and took them over, you would inherit those upgrades while you controlled them. So it's kind of a fun way of, you can sometimes get more upgrades than you're supposed to, because if you already had a couple bulk delivery stacks and you get a router that has bulk delivery, then you get theirs on top of yours. So there's some really cool stuff there with being able to try and keep one host alive, and it's a little bit of an inversion of what you were doing, but it's only for a short time because, again, you only have that health bar and then you're done. You gotta swap.
Yeah, keeping with the theme of the game, the strength of enemies is also your strength, like danger is opportunity. So elite enemies are more of a threat to you if you're not controlling them, but they're also a potential increase in power if you possess them, and also a loot pinata. Because they're worth so much more score, they're excellent fodder for setting up trick shots and getting a ton of score at once. So you'll see me, for example, fishing for deflection kills against this elite in the middle here, because I know that it's going to be worth a lot more points to get a deflection.
It also had what we call a swap shield on it, which means that Andrew couldn't swap into it while it had that shield. So even though he decided to execute it instead of taking it over, he had to deal with that shield beforehand. So that's a way of kind of mitigating certain encounters where you might not want the player to swap immediately. And in the full game, there'll be even bigger versions of inhibitors that will block off areas, or specific enemies can have them, so that it makes it that you have to play a little bit more thoughtfully.
Yeah, the swap is basically an instant kill, so we need ways to limit that, obviously. Okay, and here you see a recently added mechanic to the game. This is a new type of encounter where we have these things called swap jammers, which are those Tesla coil-looking things. And while these are active, enemies infinitely respawn, there is no way to clear the wave, and you will not get any score from enemies, which prevents farming them. And you can see here, I've kind of spaced out and gone on autopilot, and I'm just fighting the enemies, but really all of that was wasted time, because I wasn't getting points for any of those guys, and I just should have been going for the jammers. So that's a way of testing a bit of a different skill set, is like evading the enemies and really focusing on rushing down certain objectives instead of just staying in the normal flow of combat.
And this is another one of these elites, and this one's almost a bit of a mini-boss. He's got a really strong shield, and he's got induction barrel, so he's got flame damage, and you really got to chunk him down before you take him out.
Yeah, this guy's a bit notorious, I think, among players of the game, because the way the score scaling works, this guy has so much health that I think it's worth like half the score of the boss or something, so if you set up a trick shot, you can really farm some good score off of that dude.
Something that you've been doing a lot, which you're not controlling the steel toe right now, but something that's a really fun part of the steel toes kit is that it can do this thing called a nail driver, where its special attack is this melee short range pulse that can deflect enemy bullets, but you can actually kind of pull a bit of a V1 and punch your own bullets with your resonance hammer, and we call that a nail driver, and that can either diffract your bullets and make them go spread wider, or they can go really, really tight, and you shoot basically all of them at one enemy, and it's really, really powerful, and it's a really good way of getting kind of a bit of a kill shot with a steel toe, which are kind of generally the more average, normal shotgun character in a game like this.
Yeah, it's all the bots, it's a really important part of Ram's design. They should all have their own little micro game loops and their own kind of advanced tech to use, as if they were a full-fledged character in a game where you didn't control the enemies. Like, the enemies in RAM aren't designed first as enemies and then we slap a player control scheme on. They're made as player characters and then given AI to work as enemies. So they always have sufficient depth to be fun in isolation before they're added to the whole Mayhem mix.
And now we're at the last shop, so we're about to fight the boss. And the boss is really cool because a lot of games say, oh, you can control the boss, you can get the boss in your party in an RPG or whatever, but in RAM you actually get to be the boss during the boss fight, and it's exactly what it sounds like. So the boss has an inhibitor, which we'll see in a second here once we get in there, but part of the boss fight is trying to figure out how to get into this boss, because if you can control it, you can do a lot of damage.
Yeah, and the boss fights are unique in the way they utilize the swap mechanics. We didn't want to prevent the player entirely from swapping into the boss, because that's a missed opportunity, but we obviously can't just have a single shield that will deplete and then you can control it forever afterwards. So instead we worked in this kind of, here I am controlling the boss briefly, basically a parry and riposte system, where during certain actions you can damage the boss or get the boss to ram into these pillars that it creates, which will deplete its sort of inhibitor bar. And if that goes down, you can temporarily swap into it and essentially set up the arena, regain your juice. A good strat that I like to use is to make a pillar with an aphid on it, then just stand in the flamethrower for a while, because that does a lot of damage to the boss for free.
And something that's cool about the boss is that it lets you fight it with almost any character that you want because of the different ways that the arena works. You can see that when you break the pillars, they leave behind rubble, and that's perfect for deadlift, which needs objects to launch and juggle. We haven't really talked too much about that, but you can grapple objects and then send them back for really big damage. But sometimes if there's no enemies to throw, you're in a bit of a pickle, so having those pieces of rubble allows it to be a bit more viable.
Yeah, the rubble was added specifically to make deadlift stronger against the boss, because it used to be kind of useless in this context. As you can imagine, it's a bit hard to balance boss fights around having like 4 to 8 different playable enemies, so we look forward to doing that as we design more of them in the future.
And that about does it for this run. Really good job, Andrew. Great gameplay. And thanks everybody for watching. And why don't you try the demo out for yourselves? It's on Steam.
Yes, thank you to the London Games Fest for having us, and like Toby said, if you're interested in trying RAM, the demo is freshly updated and free to play, so I hope you enjoy trying it. Thank you.